With our landscapes that you guys are going to be working on with the watercolor, you're going to be using a lot of dull colors, a lot of earth tones, and I just want to show you guys how to do that with these brighter palettes and just a couple things with watercolor. So what you're going to do is paint in bright colors. So straight from the palette colors, use good craftsmanship, paint these in. I did not do that because of time constraints. So what you guys are going to be doing is dulling down your yellow, green, blue, violet, orange, whatever you choose. You might have a red in there. And you'll dull those down. Just don't use brown or black. So to dull it down, you guys are going to have a paint palette that looks like this. This is actually a lid to another container I use for 3D. So make sure that you guys are taking care of this, not cracking it. You'll rinse these off at the end of the class period. So just like with our other palettes, if I'm scooping up paint, I use a little bit of water, get some blue paint, roll it off my paintbrush. Now I have blue paint on my palette. So I'm going to start with yellow, and I dry off my paintbrush just like I did before. So this is yellow straight from the container. I'm going to dull it down with its complement. So yellow is opposite violet on the color wheel. I have a lot of violet on my paintbrush, so I'm just going to stick it to the side, and we can see a little bit closer. It's just going to dull down that yellow so it's not quite as bright. Okay, then I'm just going to add it to this section here. You guys would use really good craftsmanship to do this. If you ever get too much water, you can always dry off your paintbrush and repaint. That way it's not dripping all over the place. So blue's complement is orange. So I'm gonna take a little bit of orange and add it to my blue to dull it down. It's still too bright for my taste, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of that orange. Then I'm gonna paint my paper. It's a little bit too watery. I don't want it to drip all over the place, so I'm going to dry off my paintbrush, pull up a little bit of that. Now, I don't have a pure yellow anymore because I dulled it down, so I need to put yellow over here so I can add it to my violet to dull down my violet. If it ever gets too gray, like if this is too gray for me, it's neutralized it too much, I can always wash off my brush, add a little bit more violet to it, just so it's more of a dulled down violet. Okay, orange. Add a tiny bit of blue to my orange to dull it down so it's not so bright. Okay, now the reason why I had you guys do that is I'm unifying this color scheme. This is not a color scheme. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I just selected colors. But if I dull everything down, then this becomes a unified color scheme and it's just low intensity colors, okay? With building the layers, you guys are going to take your paint and just paint across this area. You can leave a section on the top open, that's fine. When you build a layer, let's say if I'm working with violet, I wait for it to dry, and I don't know why it's divided into two, just ignore that. If I wanted to create texture over the surface and I just wanted to do little splotches, I can do that. I can build it with different colors, or if I wanted to do like little stripes in my violet, I would let this section now dry. Let that dry and add another layer. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but it does change that value quite a bit. Or if I wanted to use, purple's a pretty dark color. I don't know if this green will even show up over it, but we can kind of mix while it's wet as well. We just don't want it dripping out of the space, but we can mix that while it's wet. When I'm looking at oil pastel, so dark oil pastel over light oil pastel, I'm not talking about colors, I'm talking about pressure. So I press pretty hard into this space right here. And then in this one, I'm just gonna go really light over the surface. You guys can see the difference. So I used a light blue, so I'm gonna use a darker blue paint over the surface. And you guys can kind of see this oil repels that paint. And so wherever I have the oil pastel, it's not gonna wanna take on that paint. If I do it lighter, it's really subtle. You can barely see it over the surface. If I do it darker, you're gonna see it repelling that paint. So you're gonna have that effect with it. Last part, you guys are gonna show me a color scheme that you guys wanna use. Are you gonna create dull colors for your background? So for example, in this one, I did really light oil pastel. I did a little heavier here. I did some peach oil pastel, and then I did a really dull red over the top. This is a teal, but I dulled it down with its complementary color so it looks more natural. So you guys will practice this as a class, and then we'll be moving on to getting your contour line of your landscape drawn.